It's a Monday evening and welcome. You know, it's time for Motivation Monday. We've been running these couple of conversations with Standard Bank, talking to people who've made it very far in the CA profession, asking them how they made it and also seeking from them to impart particular lessons on some of you that may be writing professional exams or even university exams in the next couple of weeks. Next week, it is our final installment, and we've got the boss herself, Funeka Manjane, will be telling us exactly how she made it into one of the most powerful women in banking in South Africa. But before we get to next week, we're going to take a detour and go to a province that has become a bit famous these days, but it's famous for reasons that we're not going to discuss today, because my guest tonight is actually from the Free State, Mr. Isaac Mahanke. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Khaya. How are you?
I'm good. The boy from Kwakwa. Tell us exactly what happened from the moment you were growing up in Kwakwa and then you ending up saying, I'm a chartered accountant at Standard Bank.
It's been a long journey. So like you mentioned, I grew up in Kwakwa. I attended the Beacon High School and what's the thing? And then from there I actually chose accounting, not accounting science, I chose physical science as well as biology with the intention of actually studying medicine. So I never knew about chartered accountancy until later on in my life when I moved to varsity at Johannesburg at the Witwatersrand University. And that is where I actually got introduced to chartered accountancy. But my initial intention was to enroll into medicine. I did enroll in first year of science with the intention of actually studying towards being a doctor. But growing up, I was only exposed to such careers such as being the medical profession, such as the emergency professions, as well as the educational sector. So I never knew anything about chartered accountancy and what that profession entailed. Yeah. So on my journey then I back to vets, and that is where actually I was introduced to different career options, and chartered accountancy was one of them.
Yeah, indeed. By the time we get to university, you've already made the call. So it's not like you're sitting in a BSc class and then you stumble upon an accounting class and you say, well, actually, this is what I do. How did you actually then end up attaining the type of knowledge or access to information that then say to you, actually, maybe this is where you might be willing to try your trade?
Well, I did enroll in first year and I completed the first year of BSc, but it was during that year I was actually discovering a lot of knowledge around different types of career that I could be interested in, because I didn't actually have interest in actually pursuing medicine. So then I had the choice in terms of actually I need to research what is the next best option for me that I would like to pursue. But then when you meet a lot of people, they tell you about their passion, on all the talents and so forth. But then this university was such a big campus. They had lots of information and they invited various guests, various companies to actually explain the different types of careers that you can embark on. So that's where I met the top 4 firms such as Deloitte, KPMG and PwC, among others. And then that's where my curiosity started, and I was like, I think this is the career that I can actually pursue. So that is where I actually decided then that this is actually a profession that I'd like to go into. It is quite interesting, it is vast, and the number of careers that you can actually go into if you actually attain that qualification. So it became my next challenge to say I would like to actually be a chartered accountant, but that came with a number of challenges. Now having to explain back at home why you don't want to be a doctor and what is this chartered accountancy that you actually want to embark on. So that is where I actually decided, and it was a number of visits from different firms, as well as interacting with a number of lecturers to actually understand what this profession entailed. And that's where I actually made my decision. It was quite easy.
The interesting thing at VETS is that if you're studying from the East Campus, you only interact with the West Campus for social reasons. And people from the West Campus only go to the East Campus to socialize and to go to the matrix. So for you to cross that bridge and then end up with a different career option was quite an interesting journey. You speak about the fact that you wanted to be a doctor because that is the thing that you knew, that is the thing that was understood, that is the thing that was known around the community. Now, the reality is that for a lot of people, that is the reality, that we actually only know of those limited professions based on the visibility that we enjoy or the proximity with the people that practice them. Now, the interesting thing about that is that I always ask people who then do migrate into these different professions, and the first thing that they do is that they move out of those communities. And I always say to them, but wait a minute, you've just realized that the fact that there was no one who was doing this in this particular community meant that you had an entire childhood. You went through being a teenager, you went through an entire schooling career without actually knowing about this profession. And yet at the first instance where you can then be the person who exists in that community, who then teaches other people in that community about the existence of this profession, we pack up and we go.
Yeah.
Why?
Wow, that's actually quite interesting. Look, I think because we're not really that exposed in my community, I think then it was the responsibility was upon me to actually go back and actually advocate to say, look, there is more out there in the world, and you actually need to start doing your research, spend more time around libraries or resources that are available. And then I also advocated at church and certain community centers to say, okay, these are the types of careers that are actually out there, and these are the requirements that you need to actually explore these types of careers. So I think myself, when I go back home, that is actually what I advocate back to say, like, look, as a small community, you're only exposed to certain professions, but however there is more out there. And then I use myself as an example to say, like, look, the journey might be long, you might actually have to dabble in few what you call it degrees and until you find your own passion. So I think the responsibility then, when I went back home during my varsity studies, I used to go back during holidays and actually tutor some of the students and actually share some of my experiences to say how I came about actually selecting this career.
Yeah. And you know, that information gap that existed in your time when you were young, do you feel that perhaps a lot more has been done to narrow the gap? There's a greater awareness within the communities of really the different career options, and more importantly, the type of information cannot be just on a booklet, because that itself isn't going to tell a young person about the type of issues and the type of challenges they're going to face. So not only do we have to bridge the information gap by making the information available, we do need actual advocates to occasionally go into those social spaces, whether it's a church or whether it's a community event, and then say, by the way, this is what it actually means to say I do what I do. Is that the type of work that you've really looked at doing in your career?
Yes, so that's the type of work that I'm actually looking to do in my career. I've been in touch with a number of students from back home who actually reach out and then they just say, look, I'm looking for a job and I know you're in this field and I want to pursue this career. And then that is where you actually disseminate the information and actually help a person frame the career path to say, okay, you need to actually follow certain steps. And rightfully so, there isn't really much booklets around, but with today's help of technology and certain social media, you can actually reach out to more students. But also word of mouth also works well, because if I meet my teachers as well as principals, and then as soon as they find out what are you up to, they go back and advocate and they invite you back to actually provide such information. And I think with the technology that exists today, that goes a long way, where people can actually be curious and actually try and get more information around various careers that are available. In my hometown now, there are a number of CAs that have actually come from my era as well as after me, which is very interesting. Certain kids that were taught by my parents, when they reach out to say, I became a chartered accountant because someone told me that you are a chartered accountant and this is what it means. So that actually means that the word is actually spreading and it's reaching far remote communities in my area, because I come from Kwakwa, and Kwakwa is such a big place. One might think it's small, but it's big, but it's disconnected, either based on infrastructure and so forth. But the availability of technology and word of mouth and such community centers that are available to uplift youth, when you get an opportunity, I usually get involved and get invited, and that's where I actually try and advocate as much as possible to say, guys, there is a big world out there. You need to actually look after yourself and actually look after your grades, because I think it's quite important, especially at high school. That is where everything gets shaped up. We were lucky in that we were told that to study medicine you need maths and you need various subjects and you need to be very good in those so that you can actually have a better option or better chance of actually getting into some of the best institutions. But I think with the guys having limited knowledge of careers that are there, they actually give up, especially around high school, and don't work at their marks. So it's quite saddening. So I think some of the knowledge that we impart back, or some of the career advice would say, work on your high school marks and actually try and pursue these careers. Especially chartered accountancy, we say you can do whatever as long as you've got your maths, you can actually approach us.
You know, the value of teachers is actually World Teachers Day today, and I always want to reflect on the role that teachers can play in either providing us access to information or just the motivation to say, well, actually, it may look difficult right now, but in the long run, you're better off pursuing what we used to call the difficult subjects. So you studied the physics, maths, and biology. And for a lot of people, they'd be like, those are the hard subjects. Why am I pursuing those things when there's other options out there? But of course, it does open up the opportunities where you can now say, when you get to university, actually, yeah, I want to digress and go into something different. And those are the type of subjects that are so universal in nature that they'd be like, well, if you've done this, we know that you're able to adapt. What advice would you give to young people that are actually just probably still trying to figure out, should I do this or should I not do this, when you actually now know, with hindsight, just the benefit of actually going for the pure maths, for example, and sciences and the physics and biology?
I think the advice that I normally give is that try and understand that there are certain subjects that will open up your world. So they will not limit you into a certain particular path. So if you try and master those, and if you struggle in those, there is help available. So I think teachers are very good at that. They can actually advocate to say, guys, if you take these difficult subjects, there could be strategies that we can actually adapt in terms of either reaching out to ex-students or either other teachers to actually help out. Because I think at the moment, the limited resources, especially with teachers that actually dedicate themselves in these pure subjects, they're very few and they're very limited. But however, with them actually using their networks and reaching out to some of us to say, when you're home, do you mind actually maybe spending a day with some of my students and actually giving them a different perspective to what lessons I've provided them in the class. So those are some of the activities that actually help. So I think one of the things I would say is that, guys, pursue those challenging subjects, because it just takes someone to actually lift certain ideas, and once it clicks, I think you will actually start enjoying the subject.
Wits University is not the easiest university in the world. It's a great, challenging curriculum. There are some famous names that everybody always reflects on. Dave Collins is one, Warren Maroon is one. How did you find just that part of the university environment where you're trying to get through the BXI program and eventually get into a chartered accountant?
I must say Wits University was brutal, to say the least. As you mentioned, their curriculum is quite intense. It's fast-paced. There is very limited time. You spend most of the time around campus to try and make sure first you grasp the concepts, and after that you need to be able to demonstrate that you understand the concepts and you can actually write and pass those subjects. So for me it was a bit challenging. I had to first bridge the knowledge gap that I had from my high school. I had to get into terms and understanding English, because English is my second language. So now having to actually now study all subjects in English, it was a bit of a challenge to try and actually do planning, understand exam techniques. Those are some of the soft skills that you were not taught back at school, to say you need to manage your time, you need to understand exam skills, you need to understand the concepts so that you are able to apply them. So I needed to find a way to actually try and understand my role in the whole area, and how can I actually try and excel and actually come out as well and compete with the other kids. So it was quite a challenging time, but eventually once I found my footing and understood what was required of me, then I dedicated the time. So I think you also need to put in the time and make sure that whatever you put in will actually yield positive results. If you get negative feedback, you go back and then reflect and actually come out strong and say, actually, this is where I went wrong, how can I correct it, and actually see whether can you actually pursue this.
So it's all about commitment and dedication and planning your way through life. Articles, there were the 3 years that we all had to go through. How was your experience during articles at Deloitte?
I think even with articles as well, it's one of those things that you are plunged in. As much as we did vacation work was mainly involved you running around making copies for the partner, meeting the clients, but you actually never grasped and understood what the article clerks actually go through. So I think that environment as well was a bit challenging. I had to come in, and you're coming in and you need to actually work and study at the same time, and actually make sure whatever concepts that you are applying at work is aligned to what you are studying. Make sure you get the competencies that you need to actually score points towards completing your article. So article was quite challenging, but I had friends, I had support to actually make sure that I can actually put in the time, make sure that I'm exposed to the right type of customers to actually make sure that I have the best experience. So I did my articles at Deloitte. I had lots of friends and then good community and good support. So there's one thing about articles is that because you're all in the same boat, you're all feeling the same pressure. So the support is there. You are able to show each other. You are able to teach each other new things. You learn from each other's strengths. You learn from each other's good communication skills. You try and understand how others actually excel. They show you where your weaknesses are and you can improve on them. So article environment is quite interesting. The first year was a bit challenging, but I think after the first year I found my footing, understood the direction that I wanted to take, and therefore I pursued that and then accessed a number of mentors, networks within the firm, and that actually helped me succeed.
I think one of the great things about doing articles within an audit environment is that you obviously get to intersect with a whole lot of different clients, and if you like him, a whole lot of different sectors. And that also comes in very importantly at the end of the articles journey, when you now reach either a career crossroads where you either have to decide to stay or even branch out. What became the variables that drove your decision making towards you saying, okay, I've done my time at Deloitte, this is where I'd like to branch to? Was it because of clients you'd audited before, or was it simply saying, let me look for something completely new?
So for me, I got the audit bug while I was during articles. I was involved in the mining sector. I audited Anglo American, some of their subsidiaries such as Anglo Coal, Anglo Plat, some of the Plat Med. So that actually gave me enough teeth for me to sink in to say I actually want to pursue audit as a profession. It was only when I got seconded in overseas, Cincinnati, Ohio, where I actually saw a different approach, where I got seconded to a bank. That's where I audited the banking, and I got introduced to banking. And it's only post that when I came back and said, look, I think as much as I love auditing, there are other avenues that I can actually also utilize my skills and actually pursue and understand other industries, with the intention that I'll come back to audit later with much more broader commerce knowledge and experience, to say when I come back later as a senior manager, I'll have that appreciation of saying I have a client experience, I understand how the other side actually work, what keeps them awake at night as a client, so that when I do come in and audit and understand the different business cycles, I'm more comfortable and actually I can impart that experience with my audit colleagues. So for me, I've always had the audit bug. Maybe one day I'll go back to audit, but the reason to actually branch out was purely because I got exposed when I was overseas to other industries such as banking, and then from there I decided, let me pursue banking with that intention to go back.
And that banking bug obviously led you to start a bank. How long have you been here? What do you do? Still enjoying it?
Yeah, so the banking bug led me to Standard Bank. I started here in 2012. I've been here since. I've held various roles in finance. In 2015, then I branched out into the product side in TPS, where I look after traditional trade products. I'm a product manager there, and what we do is that we actually finance import and exporters, and we also provide lots of risk mitigants such as letters of credits and guarantees to give comfort along the value chain, that if importers and exporters don't know one another, the bank comes in between there to say, like, look, you guys can actually transact. We give you that comfort that you're working with a world-class bank and you can trust it, and therefore you get that comfort that should you need your money, you'll be able to get your money out.
So you're keeping the wheels of our economy moving.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, Isaac, obviously it's important for all of us to have a sense of purpose when we do the work that we do. And I always ask people this, you know, when you wake up and you say, that's the value that I'm adding to society, that's the value that I'm adding to an institution, that's the value that I'm adding to my family. I think a job like yours, when you can actually see the fact that something got delivered and a transaction happened, is because you are intimately engaged in it, means that you're able to get that value every single day. And I'm very jealous of you, because obviously I deal more with spreadsheets, so sometimes I can't see the impact of that on society. But I think it's important for all of us to have that one thing that we can always say, that the reason I exist, the reason I do this, is because this is what it means to society at large. Are you still comfortable with that?
Yes, no, I'm still comfortable with that. Like you well put it, it's that if you understand that when the bank says we are driving Africa's growth, you can see that your contribution actually contributes towards that growth. You know that today if someone said that I have successfully imported shoes from China and the bank was involved, that at the end of the day impacts society as a whole, given that that person will be able to sell their product to people that actually need the product. It end up somewhere in the rural area where someone actually wears shoes to go to school. So I think for me, it gives me that that drive to actually wake up in the morning to say I am actually making an impact, a positive impact in society, in Africa at large. We are still driving the bank's vision. I think for me as well, I can pinpoint it back to my family to say this contribution that I'm making is actually making a difference in my family. They can actually feel proud that, look, my son is involved in this, and we can actually see the difference that he's making, and we are proud of that. So
you're a very good son to have. Isaac Mahanke, thank you very much for joining us on Motivation Mondays. Guys, next week we've got the big boss herself, Funeka Monjane, joins us. So obviously if you want to ask the questions that you've always wanted to ask about how she made it to be the CEO of Personal and Business Banking for all of Standard Bank, next week is your time to meet up with her. 5:30 Monday morning. See you then. And until then, remember Friday evening, 5:30 p.m. we go technical. I'll see you next week Monday on Motivation Mondays. Thank you.